It is currently close to the middle of July, and I'm finally getting this done. I've been sitting on these books for about 2 weeks saying that I'm going to get this done. Uh, I haven't at all, but now I'm finally doing it. So let's get into it. Hi, my name is Megan. This is my channel, Pop Girly Meg. I talk about anything and everything that I kind of like have my mind on, uh, whether it be pop news, TV shows, or books. Currently, I've been trying to get out of my reading slump. I feel like, I don't know, I'm 26 years old. I've spent a lot of my youth reading. I was obsessed with a whole bunch of different things from Percy Jackson to Hunger Games, all those things I loved when I was younger. And then I kind of just stopped reading once I got into high school. And as I got older, I decided I needed something to do and I wanted to get back into reading. And so this is my journey currently, trying to get back into reading. And so I've decided I'm going to document it through this channel and through this time and showing all the different things that I enjoy reading, all of the books that I've been getting into, kind of my journey on how I'm going to get better and better at reading and enjoying my time reading as well. So let's get into this. These are all the books that I read. I'm doing this bi-monthly because I think that it's just going to be easier, especially with like how I work and how I and how I choose to read my books. Fact of the matter is that I have a very difficult time kind of just sitting still and taking my time to read. So I usually set upon goals for myself to read, and then I also have two separate books that I read at a time. That being said, I'm still technically a pretty slow reader. I'm not very fast by any means. So I'm doing this bi-monthly. So this is all May and June that I've done. And then I'll do a July and August one as well. But right now, this is all I've read for June and May. We'll start off going from the first book I read in May all the way to the last book I read in June. The first book I technically read was like a YA suspense thriller book. It's called Such Charming Limers by Karen McManus. I enjoyed this book. It wasn't like my most favorite out of the way book. It was probably not my least favorite book of what I read during the time, but definitely my most definitely like kind of the more out there I've read. I've read YA, but I've never really gotten into suspense or thriller, so I thought this was a good little quick 5-minute jaunt into the park of it. This is just about a girl whose mom is a criminal or career criminal who does like jewelry heists and all of that. And then also another boy whose dad is a career con artist. And so it's kind of more interesting about seeing how their paths cross. Because I'm not going to give any spoilers, I've decided. How their paths cross, how they both end up in this, trying to go after this one specific necklace and being connected to this one family, and how they reconnect from their past journey being together or being connected to one another. I thought this was cute. This also has great representation. There's an LGBTQ characters in it as well as some other stuff. I did quite enjoy this book. Did I think that it was my age demographic? No, not really, but I still enjoyed it. I think that if you're looking for something to get into, like you're just starting to like tap your foot back into reading again, I think this is actually not that bad of a book. I rated it technically 3 out of 5 stars. It was fine. Like it was above average, but not my favorite book. Also, back into this book, I do think that this is like one of the more interesting things of trying just to explore different genres. I tend to go YA first just because I feel like it's a more palatable to understand because it tends to be for younger people, so you have to have like different type of genres. It I don't think that necessarily it's required for you to kind of jump in adult wise first. It never hurts to go YA first just because it's a little more it's a little more available to kind of go after you and like understand where you're coming from. And it's a little more palatable for it. It's a little more easier to understand. It's less deep, it's less dark. I think that it's more of an enjoyable time to do something like this compared to like a different book where you're kind of getting in, you're kind of diving into the deep end, which is kind of hard. And so I'm not opposed to going in YA first. I choose to go YA first, especially when you're trying to get into different genres like horror or thriller or suspense, where you necessarily didn't do that beforehand. It's always a fun one to do YA first and then go into the deep end with adult. When I was in high school and everything, they really did have us read the classics. I know that a lot of people also read the classics during that time. Um, and they're hard. They're hard to get into. My least favorite book by far was actually Crime and Punishment. Hated that book. Hated that book so hard that I never truly enjoyed it, and that what really turned me off reading. That being said, I'm trying to get back into the classics. I always loved Jane Austen, and my mom really got me into that. So I wanted to get back into the classics, and with the Withering Heights movie coming out, I decided I wanted to try and read Withering Heights. I will admit, this took me the longest to get through out of my books. I started this in late winter, really hit my slump, was not interested in touching this book at all. Finally retouched it, trying to find something to read during work time. I work in a type of job that allows me some sort of free time if I'm not on call. So I will bring books instead to read as like my goal to keep me off my phone as well. And so I decided to pick up Withering Heights, and I really did truly enjoy it once I kind of started getting into it. Um, it was a bit of a hard read. It tends to be quite, for as small as it is quite dense of a book. It's a lot of description. It's a lot of having to follow different types of narratives, and as well as like character development. I did enjoy this book. It did make me angry for the movie because once I realized how different the book was from what the movie was being described as, I was getting frustrated. That being said, I did love this book. I did enjoy it. I read it in like high school, didn't remember it, and decided to read it again just because overall I wasn't ever going to remember it. And basically, I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. It's a good classic. I think that if you're ever interested in classics, I always would turn to something like this, where there is pretty good. It's not quite as dense as some other classics, but still being quite of the descriptive, flowery nature, especially if you're looking at things like romance, if you're like interested in romance or other types of like more narrative based books. I think that having something like Withering Heights to get your toe into classics is a great one. Basically, the premise of Withering Heights is it's following this guy, Mr. Lockwood, and actually the generational caretaker Nellie, as they describe what has happened in this generation's book between generational families between Heathcliff, Ayrshire, and Linton, and how all of these families have conflicts and drama that all occur within this book. And I think that it's an interesting book. It kind of follows the generations because you have technically, I think, 2 to 3 generations within this book in which you're discussing things. And being able to follow it from an unreliable narrator is, I also think, a really interesting play on what's been occurring. I really liked it. I can understand why some people wouldn't like it. It's not super like traditional like what we think of drama now when we think of books, or when we think of like TV shows and stuff like that. This is no Love Island. That being said, I love Love Island, but this is no Love Island. I, however, enjoyed this book, especially for the drama point of it. There's a lot of good thematic reading in it as well. So if you also are a high schooler who are looking for good discussion books or looking for good books to write essays on, I highly recommend this. It's not a super deep read either. It's going to be about 250 pages. So if you're interested in it, I always suggest it. This is one of my favorite classics. I mean, now that I have a whole bunch of classics, that being said, I'm still a Greek prose and Jane Austen girl first and foremost, but I do think that this is one of my favorite ones compared to things like what I've read, Jane Eyre, some other ones that I found a little too dense for me to enjoy really a whole bunch. But I did read this at the beginning or end of May, and I really enjoyed it. Every once in a while, I'll see a book and I'm just so curious about it that I'll end up buying it and then reading it and then being somewhat disappointed in it. That was this book. I loved the premise of it. I loved the idea. Spoilers. Uh, this book is about a woman who dies eating like essentially a White Castle microwave hamburger. But she finds the love of her life while in the afterlife, and so she makes the deal, comes back to life to find this guy again and basically go on her love journey. I rated this on Goodreads as 3, but really it was like 2.5 out of 5 stars. I don't think it's a bad book. I actually think if it's right up your alley, I think that Love of My Afterlife is great. I do truly believe that Love of Your Afterlife would be great if it's like your type of book. If you're into the romance, if you're into like kind of this more zhizhi type of thing. It does have explicit scenes, so if someone's not into that, that's also something not to pick it up for, but I didn't really care for either way. I doesn't bother me. I read fan fiction all throughout my life, so just know it's never truly as bad. That being said, it did not I did not love it. A lot of it, spoiler alerts, the book itself isn't that bad. It's just that it had a lot of like different type of like humor that I don't think I understood, especially when it came for like making references to like different types of people and like different types of like events that happen. This takes place in London, and also to the fact that like I feel like it was just very millennial chic. I listen, I love a good millennial moment. However, like every reference to it was something millennial, and I just don't think it was a little too cheesy for me. It was a little too millennial cheesy for me, and I think that if it's your book, it's your perfect book. I just don't think I loved it. I don't think that outside of the premise, it didn't really do much for me. I didn't like the lack of it just was like a lot of this book could have been taken out if people just talked. A lot of this time, a lot of the book, if we had just been like completely authentic with one another. And we weren't. And that's what bugged me. I liked the idea of this. I think that whomever decides to kind of make it a movie, it'll be great. That's my big thing. Is like half of these romance books I end up reading, I'm like, well, if it's a movie, I'll watch it. I just don't want to read it. And I feel bad saying that. But like it's just one of those things where like I'll watch the movie, I won't read it half of the time just because it's sometimes really cringy to get through, especially when they're having their internal thoughts. I wanted to like this a lot more than I think that I thought. And also, I thought it was going to be a lot darker for a book, but because it is this traditional romance book, it's pretty much on the lighter side for most things, even when they talk about dark subjects. So I think that that's something to also like put into notion. It's never going to be like a truly deep talking book. It's just going to be an easy book. And that's okay. I think that if you like easy books, it's a good book to get through, especially if you're willing to like go through some of like the cringy moments, which some people really enjoy. I think that there's something about having like a cringy moment that like everyone relates to, that I can understand where you came from. And I think if you do like a lot of the millennial core stuff and the millennial, and you're a millennial yourself, and you want something to be like, oh, I remember that. Oh yeah, that's so funny because I also understand that. I think this is also a great book to read. It's cute. It meant well. I did like the ending, especially once we get through one of the characters. It's just this little old Asian gentleman. I love him. He was the heart and soul of this book, and I love that little guy. That being said, that was probably my favorite part of the book, was his journey with the characters and how they also connected to him. So there's my story for the day. That one, I did this one, I think also mid May. I finished this one and it was pretty good. I'm gonna go with my favorite. My next read was my favorite read of the past 2 months. I picked up Madeline Miller's Circe. I decided I wanted to read it. I was a huge, and when I mean huge, I meant huge Percy Jackson fan. I followed it well from my childhood into middle school. I did not read it in high school, admittedly, but that's because I didn't read anything in high school aside from my school books. But I read this one. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I rated it technically 4 um, on Goodreads, but it was 4 out of 5 stars for me IRL. This book I think was great. And I love this mainly because I love the idea of mythos. The myths have always been something that I've been personally into, especially when it comes to Greek mythology. And I kind of enjoyed this book because it kind of flipped the myths on themselves. You kind of start to see this more in-depth conversation about the myths of what happens afterwards. What do we see when we're not in the prose happening? How does this person change because of whatever myth that we have? I think that when we get to have this conversation, you kind of start to see it becomes a deeper conversation of personal belief versus fate. We know that Circe has different types of fate, have different types of effects of fate, because she is a goddess, because of all the myths around her, because of how many people are interconnected to her. We see how the myths play into one another. We also get to see what I really enjoyed personally was the interconnection of myths. More often than not, myths are kind of like, because of how their prose are, we don't actually get to see different heroes interact with one another, just because the prose are how they are, in that we're focusing on one singular tale, we're not focusing on other ones. And so to be able to have this kind of like interconnected line through one singular goddess, it almost kind of connects that world together that we don't usually get to see when it comes to mythology. That's what I really enjoyed about it, as well as seeing her kind of take the independence and being kind of more self assured and not relying on just what fate has for her. And I really enjoy this, especially when we're looking at that. You kind of get to see beyond just the singularity of the myth, of the prose that we get at the end of the day. Instead, now we're focusing on what else was also there. Do I think that this is an perfect retelling of every single Greek mythology? No. No, it's not. In fact, it takes a lot of liberties when it comes to the Greek mythology, because of how we're trying to write this tale about how she grows into her independent self. It does not have the most authentic version of the myth, but that to me doesn't really matter. I kind of find that it's not the most important thing of the tale, and because it's just a simple retelling and kind of a fictional retelling of it, it doesn't really matter to me. This is about the character that she's framed off of what it is, similar to how we do Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson is not a retelling of all Greek myths. In fact, that it takes a lot of liberties when it comes to all of these things, but that doesn't take away from the story itself. The story is more authentic than that, and I think that that's what's important about the film, or about the book. And so I hope that you can read this book. I did truly enjoy it. I think that Madeline Miller is a great character, a great author. I'm actually reading Song of Achilles right now. I'm kind of like right at the point where it's supposed to be depressing. So I'm getting into that. I love that one even more than this one currently. And so I'm very excited to see what she also has in store with the Hades and Persephone ones. But I really enjoyed this book. I think that she does a great job of retelling it while still being somewhat authentic compared to some other books that I've read. As you can already tell, I have quite the array of books. I also try to read pretty authentic conversations about the political environment and every other thing that I want to do. I want to learn about my life. I want to learn about our earth and how I can continually improve it and all of these things, as well as being a better ally to all of these people. So I read Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. I really enjoyed this book, but I can understand where some people find faults. However, I think that this is important to read if you are actually interested in being an ally. I think that it is a conversation to be had that essentially, in her different types of essays that she writes on different issues, it all comes back to the core value of what we're all looking at, which is what I personally interpreted as a Maslow hierarchy of needs. I rated this technically actually 4 out of 5 stars, just so everyone knows before I start getting into it. This was 4 out of 5 stars. I think that it could have been changed kind of essay wise. I would have changed the essays in what order they were in because of I think that it could have been a better order to kind of build up what we're trying to get to and what conversations we're having. Basically, Hood Feminism is about Mickey's own journey, as well as her understanding of the feminist movement and how it lacks the space for minority women, especially those who are low income, poverty stricken ones. And I think that she has a good conversation about it. One of the biggest things that she kind of touches on is how the feminist movement lacks intersectionality and lacks the initiative for important issues. And I have to agree, when we talk about movements and issues that need to be faced, we need to talk about it within the conversation of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need to have a conversation of what comes first: shelter, food, water, and health. And then you move up. And what I think we're failing to do when it comes to movements is we tend to keep it shallow level at making it high on this hierarchy of needs instead of looking at the deep-seated issues that a lot of other, especially lower income communities are more pressed with and more concerned about, therefore alienating them from movements. They're going to be more focused on trying to make sure that they have a house over their head, make sure they have food on the table, make sure that they have clean water, making sure that they have all these different things. And without these conversations, we are doing an injustice to movements by failing to have these conversations. And by focusing on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it allows you to really put forth the intersectionality that we need to understand from each different group of people and understanding what their needs come first and what needs are more important for them. More groups are going to be more important about housing than they are going to be about like different other issues where we're failing to understand where they're coming from. We need to understand where everything's going to be coming from first before we ever like sit down, go, yes, we can focus on self-assurance and all of these other things. We need to focus on first the housing issues and first all of these things. By having these focuses, we're able to kind of hone together, build a bigger group to make sure that everyone's going up at the same time. We feel that a lot of groups feel that they're being left behind because we aren't focusing on these issues. And I think that it is a good conversation to have and a great book to read if you want to have those conversations, if you want to look at what it means to be an understanding of intersectionality when it comes to issues, especially things like housing, food insecurity, reproductive justice. All of these things are great conversations to have in understanding what the intersectionality needs are for each different group. And I really enjoyed it. I have other books that I want to read that are going to probably play into this as well. And so I'm really excited, and I was glad I read this about like in June to kind of reframe what I wanted to get from the book and reframe my part in being an ally in any sort of the manner and understanding how we can push forward, continuing and push forward in getting everyone into the equal same space that every person deserves through opportunity. Last book I read, I also rated, I believe, 4 stars out of 5, was Bright Young Woman by Jessica Knoll. I actually really did enjoy this. I think it's a great fictional retelling, especially when we talk about the conversations that it has. So this book premisely is basically a fictional retelling of Ted Bundy. It follows the girls of the house. Really, if you look up the Ted Bundy stuff, it's Chi Omega. That being said, it follows a fictional retelling of these girls after the after effects of Ted Bundy attacking the sorority house and killing 2 of their sisters. And I really enjoy this. It also follows a story of one of his victims and being attacked by Ted Bundy. And it's a great fictional book. I did truly enjoy it. Was it my favorite? No. I actually found the way that the book was told to be quite kind of messy, but I also loved the kind of core value of it. One of the things that I loved about this book was actually the fact that she chose not to um, ever name the serial killer. She kind of made it more or less about the survivors and focusing on the victims of this killer than she ever did focusing on the serial killer itself. It also put it in the frame of kind of like pointing the face at people who are crime junkie obsessed and kind of start falling for those like, oh, they become serial killer sympathetic is what I call it. They become almost intoxicated by the idea of the serial killer that they almost forget how this affects different victims and survivors of this person. And I think that it kind of put the frame in conversations of to women being like, he attacked your fellow woman. How can you put up with this? How can you agree with this? And I think that it was a great conversation to have, especially just being so victim focused and how it ended up being those ways. I also think it was a great conversation and having and showing that a lot of the sensationalized um, serial killer things often kind of ignore the fact that a lot of it is due to periodic failures and not actually the serial killer themselves. Ted Bundy is the best example of this, about how much bureaucratic failure occurred in allowing him to continue to kill people. And this book kind of really highlights that and kind of showing how they found out how much failure occurred that allowed him to continue. And I really enjoyed it. I think it's actually quite a good read, especially if you're interested in something like this. If you are interested in like serial killers and stuff like that, especially having these types of thrillers, I do agree that this is a really good book to read. That being said, you have to walk a fine line. It's a fine line that you are always going to have to walk when it comes to understanding these books. And I think you need to always be victim forward when it comes to these books. And I think that Jessica Knoll did a really good job of being victim forward, but I can understand how this walks a line that almost feels like we're just sensationalizing the most sensational serial killer that we've had, which is Ted Bundy. Like, she brings up the Zac Efron. I remember watching the Zac Efron movie of Ted Bundy, and she brings it up in this as well about how it's kind of ridiculous, and I have to agree. And I'm glad that she brings up these conversations. That being said, I do still think that we kind of lose sight in this book just because it kind of gets messy with how many, like, how we jump around everywhere from the character in the future to the character in the past to another character. It kind of jumps around a little bit much that it gets a bit messy for me, that I don't really enjoy. But overall, I think the book was actually quite good. And it was just a small pet peeve that came with how she did the book. Overall, also, this book taught me that men suck. I think that every male character that you truly actually meet in this book, that's not just like an arbitrary figure, you kind of despise by the end of it. And I think that's what I've kind of connected to in all of that book as well. Overall, I think that this was also one of my top reads for June, and I really enjoyed it. I was able to finish my month with it. It was quite fun. Overall, I enjoyed everything that I read these couple months, and so it was a good ending to my month when it came to June. All right, so that's all the books I read between May and June. Feel free to like, subscribe, and comment about the books that I have read or books that you've been reading that you think that are going to be really good or have been really good. I always love to add things to my TBR. I have way too many books on there right now that I'm trying to get through, but it never hurts to add more. But if you're also in a reading slump, let me know what books that you've been reading to get out of it. I love any book that will help me kind of enjoy reading again. And overall, I just wanted to say that I will be back with another video. When that is, who knows? When I feel the urge and desire, I will be up here in this channel again one more time. But yeah, see you sometime soon. Bye!